Good morning, this is Matteo Troncia representing ISGAN, and before starting with the topic of the webinar today, I will say a few words about ISGAN. ISGAN is the short name for the International Smart Grid Action Network, a technology collaboration program of the International Energy Agency. ISGAN is also an initiative of the Clean Energy Ministerial that has been established in 2011. ISGAN creates a strategic platform to support high-level government attention and action for the accelerated development and deployment of smarter and cleaner electricity grids around the world. ISGAN consists of 27 contracting parties. Their nominated representatives form the executive committee headed by the Presidium. The ISGAN activity is organized in working groups. We have several. Working Group 3 regards cost-benefit analysis and toolkits. Working Group 5, Smart Grid International Research Facility Networks. The Working Group 6, the Power Transmission and Distribution Systems topics. Working Group 7, Smart Grid Transitions. Working Group 9, Flexibility Markets, and the Communication Working Group, to which this virtual learning belongs to. The ISGAN's vision is to accelerate progress on the key aspects of smart grid policy, technology, and investment through the voluntary participation by governments in projects and programs. The ISGAN's activities focus on 5 principal areas: policy standards and regulation, finance and business models, technology system development, workforce skills and knowledge, users and customer engagement. ISGAN facilitates dynamic knowledge sharing, technical assistance, peer review, and where appropriate, project coordination among its contracting parties. The ISGAN value proposition relies on conferences and workshops, policy and technology briefs, discussion and technical papers that are available in the ISGAN website, casebooks, and webinars. Within ISGAN, virtual learning offers the ISGAN community means of rational and continuous technical skill update in the field of smart grids. The virtual learning is proposed as a set of e-learning and reading core modules dealing with the entire value chain of smart grids. The webinar of today is about the GDBN, a digital grid data and business network to support the flexibility-centric energy value chain. The motivation behind this GDBN, this platform, is that digitalization drives the need for interoperable coordination platform in the energy flexibility value chain. So in this webinar, we will focus on the platform that is an outcome of the Horizon Europe project, BeFlexible. This grid data and business network is, as I said, a digital framework that supports the flexibility-centric value chain for users and the system. In this webinar, we will provide an overview of the flexibility business models and the value exchange among the key stakeholders, the role of the GDBN in enabling the market processes and stakeholder coordination, thanks to the interoperability that is useful for an efficient market access. And we will also provide a live demonstration showcase of the platform features and the applications. The speaker of today is Fabre André Coelho, Senior Researcher at Inestec in Portugal. You are welcome to pose your questions at any point using the question and answer tool or the chat of this meeting. We will have a question and answer session at the end of the presentation. And as usual, the webinar recordings will be available on the ISGAN YouTube channel a few days after this webinar. Okay, now the webinar is introduced, so I can give the floor to Fabio.
So, good morning, everyone. Matteo, can you just confirm that you could see my screen sharing?
Yes, we can. I confirm.
Perfect. So first of all, thanks for the invitation to be here today together with you all. As Matteo introduced, today's session is about the GDBN, the Grid Data and Business Network. This was a development and a digital platform whose concept, the development, the deployment, and testing was completely done within the scope of the Horizon Europe BeFlexible project, which is a project which is already coming to an end, and which had a key driver, a key motivation to actually enable all of the different stakeholders within the flexibility value chain, smaller, larger, in order to ensure that all of the flexibility capacity that could be harnessed and included within the flexibility chain was not left out. This is particularly important for small players, as we will see during today's presentation. So I would like to guide you through a bit of what was the initial design, what is the concept, what were the initial challenges and barriers that somehow led to the development of this platform and some of the design choices behind it. At the core is actually the design of what we have been calling so far the flexibility value chain. So this is a concept that somehow is a multi-stakeholder concept that includes everyone, that clearly depicts what we expect from each one of them, from the timings that they should do specific tasks, and ultimately how they can benefit out of the value chain, and ultimately from the GDBN, the platform that somehow embodies the flexibility value chain. We would like to also discuss a bit the core stages of this value chain, and most importantly, to somehow provide you and let you know how we have been deploying these in the current pilots, okay? What are the partners that are fulfilling each one of these specific roles within the value chain? What have been the key learnings and also the key hurdles? And then closer to the end, I would also like to do a live presentation to somehow show you what we have been discussing in this more conceptual first part on the presentation. So let's start. That there is time for Q&A in the end. So I would appreciate that you would keep your questions to that moment, or if you please, you can. I think that you can also write them on the chat, and we will review them on the end of the presentation. Okay. So let's proceed. So the concept for the value chain, as I said, is kind of founded in this new concept for the flexibility value chain, and this is kind of a series or a sequence of key steps or pillars, as we may want to see them, okay, that somehow represent the key activities within the value chain, okay. And what we have designed, what the project has designed, are actually these 6 stages, okay, that somehow are sequenced, okay, in according to each one of the periods. So the first one for flexibility, capacitation, or enablement, where we include here functionalities, or we include here the dimension of either installing assets into flexible consumers that may not have already that capability there, or link them with already existing services, okay, including consumers that, while already being equipped with flexible assets, being PV panels, electric vehicles, battery energy storage systems, other types of white good appliances such as heat pumps or others, that consumers that, although they already have them, they are not yet integrated into the wider flexibility market, okay? There's a second step here, which we call the integration and enablement, which is more of a technical step, okay, where we include functionalities and services to precisely assist these consumers and ultimately afterwards aggregators to actually do an ICT integration with these systems. This is a digital-based flexibility energy value chain. So ultimately, what we want also to foster with this design is that we are able to link the digital services and the appliances ultimately that could then automate as much as possible all of the different steps within this value chain. There's a third step, which is the aggregation. This is kind of the step where another type of stakeholder, the aggregator, the flexibility service provider, is kind of the main player within this aggregation pillar. And this is where we will include functionalities to already allow, based on market flexibility needs, for these aggregators to look at their pools of consumers and to understand what are the technical conditions, but also the operational commitments that aggregators can make in order to place bids for flexibility assets and volume into the market, okay? Then there are two steps, okay, which are following steps: the negotiation preparation and the market operation, which actually represent the actually go-to market essentially. So this is actually where bids are prepared and bids are sent to the market operator, and ultimately where a market operator, okay, decides based on the market conditions, the flexibility needs that have been pushed or submitted to those areas, and whether the bids that have been also sent can commit to satisfy or not those requests. And ultimately, a last stage, which is the activation and settlement stage, in which, according to the market results, the flexibility parties and the aggregators are then actually requested to activate those loads, and ultimately, after the periods, to provide all of the settlement information to understand whether violations to the agreements occurred and whether any penalties or payments will need to occur and who has the rights to each one of them. You can see that the negotiation, preparation, and market operation are faded, and it's because in our design, the GDBN, our value chain, and then the digital enabler platform provided for the dimensions which are in green, and for the other ones that are faded, we rely on an actual live market operator platform to provide us this interface, and also to be able to have a demonstration with actually live information. Okay, so with this in mind, okay, the GDBN, the Grid Data and Business Network, offers here a series of capabilities, okay? Namely, the interoperable flexibility capacity. So as a digital tool, all of each one of these different pillars and or stages that we just saw on the logic conceptual flexibility value chain are represented as digital services and as key steps into this digital platform. And each one of them will be or is currently developed under the idea that the technical interfaces or the APIs, the application programming interfaces, are developed with the idea of becoming interoperable. So this means that not only the payloads, the representation of what each one of those API calls represents, they are included and implemented in a way that can be made interoperably according to all those systems. We will see some details of this ahead into the future. We want to provide here within this platform the idea of pairing. So we will be able to have here portfolios of consumers, portfolios of assets, but also portfolios of service providers. So this means that as a multi-stakeholder platform, as a cloud-based platform, the GDBN will be able to serve more than actually more than one region, and actually more than one country, of course, provided that the key enablers and stakeholders are there. And this is also a concept of lowering the barrier of costs. So large stakeholders such as large DSOs or TSOs, usually they do not have a very high barrier in terms of acquiring digital services or subcontracting this type of functionalities to third-party vendors. But in scenarios where these key stakeholders are more regional, smaller, and with less investment capital, the idea that we could provide for some services that could be easily integrated into their operational portfolio comes alive, in order to ensure that all of the flexibility capacity is brought to the market and that they are not left out. So you can see this is a big marketplace of services and operational guidance and control to ensure that no one is left out of the flexibility value chain. So we want to provide all of these services in terms of capacitating or enabling flexibility, enabling here energy and non-energy services for the value chain, services for the pre-qualification of partners, but also, and most importantly, to those partners that wish to also integrate a lot here of the cash flow. Because behind this, there's an important business use case that is somehow cloud-based. It enables these platforms to acquire these services. How do we see and how do we place the GDBN and our value chain proposition according to what is already somehow established in the market? And what we currently see here on the slide is a study that has been done on the scope of the BeFlexible project right in the beginning. So this this is dated around 2023, early 2024, where we mapped the existing at the time platforms that somehow were providing services and how were they represented along this flexibility value chain that we have devised. And what you can see is that there is somehow a more niche concentration of platforms from specific areas of the value chain. Okay, TICO or SoulMatch for the flexibility, capacitation, and integration, others such as BeFlex or Flexible Power for the aggregation part, a lot of platforms which are more dedicated to the specificities of each one of the markets where they operate and somehow represent this negotiation and market operation dimension, but also the activation and settlement phases. What we see is that we tried to bring on board these different capabilities within the GDBN, the Grid Database Business Network, that we somehow could tick the boxes on these key important stages on the flexibility value chain. Before we go ahead, it's important to note that the idea is that this platform becomes flexible. So for some of these key dimensions, we will have services that in full provide for the needs of each one of these pillars within the flexibility value chain, but we are not in a position to replace completely those other partners that can already be there. So that's why the platform is interoperable in the sense that we could either have services that, for instance, cater for the aggregation capabilities for an aggregator or a flexibility service provider, or if that entity already has its own operational platform, it could integrate those capabilities within the wider control and coordination that the Grid Data Business Network provides for the flexibility value chain and still be able to onboard. So yet again, the idea that we don't want any key partner or stakeholder to be left outside the value chain. So the design that we will present you in more detail stems from key objectives and barriers that have been identified in the past. The barriers that we see here, and of course we won't be going into a lot of detail in all of them, but we would like to cover some. And all of these barriers have been identified in the scope of a previous European project, the OneNet project, okay, which is a project that somehow ended close to the beginning of the BeFlexible European project, and somehow identify several objectives and barriers. And I would say that some of the most important ones are the ones that we were able to cater for a solution within the solution, such as barrier number one that you see there highlighted, this insufficient coordination of flexibility markets and services, along particularly regarding to the timing. Okay, so this is a barrier that is related to the times at which each one of these functionalities should occur. The insufficient coordination of different system services. So this is more in terms of controlling who can be pre-qualified, what are the baselinements, how the procurement or the activation of the flexibility should occur. We also provide for that. The lack on harmonization on flexibility products. So this also has to do a lot with the idea of the balancing service providers that somehow are more connected to TSOs, or the short-term flexibility provisioning somehow also more connected to the DSOs. This limited cross-border coordination, okay, which also the Grid Data and Business Network can provide for. ICT challenges, non-uniform access to registration and services, and also most importantly, the quantification of the benefits, because usually it's very hard to quantify outside of the market scope whether this type of services and enablers are actually becoming useful to the wider value chain. So the idea now is that we may cover a bit what we include as functionalities and ultimately services in each one of these stages. So the first one is this enablement stage. So this is a stage that right at the beginning of the value chain that essentially is aimed at including consumers. So not leaving consumers without being within the flexibility value chain. So this includes services to actually acquire them, where marketeers could use these types of services to either steer the onboarding of new customers or identifying missing opportunities that are not there. The installation in terms of marketing services of new flexible assets. This is actually a part or a new type of service that we have recently seen a lot of traction from utilities to try to maybe lease or sell these types of assets directly to the consumers in return of collecting their flexibility capacity. In Portugal, that has been a very high trend currently, but also the idea of retrofitting existing assets. So for instance, to try to make some assets which are somehow dummy currently, and the idea, a very good example are the older electric water heaters or boilers, and to retrofit them with actionable capabilities, so to make them smart in order to collect metrics and actually be able to activate them or not according to the demands, okay? And also other contracting services, so that other types of services and consumers could be brought in. In the second stage of the value chain, the integration stage, we include here, most importantly, an operational integration. So this is a step where the consumers that are on board, or even the flexibility service providers or aggregators, are prone to actually link their existing systems or interfaces. So this could represent, from the side of a prosumer, doing or informing the platform on how it should connect to its own home energy management system, if it exists, for instance, or on the side of FESPs or aggregators, how should they actually link the key stages of the flexibility bidding process and how to interface with its own existing operational platform, okay? So this is somehow a wizard that guides these different stakeholders to link their existing digital platforms and systems with the wider flexibility value chain, in this case, in the grid data and business network. This third stage, the aggregation one, this is actually where the process of deciding, doing flexibility bids, aggregating the volumes from the side of aggregators actually happens, computing baselines for what is their expected behavior in terms of the grid management, conducting the activation process after bids have been selected, and then also doing the settlement. So it's maybe a good parenthesis and point to say that you can see that value chain is shaped within a periodic part, particularly within this operational part. So we can somehow say that the enablement and integration dimensions are things that happen once at least in the beginning, or at least whenever new functionalities and features need to be included. But then when this is done, the operational dimension, which is the aggregation, the go-to-market, and the activation, are the parts that somehow become cyclical within the periods for flexibility. We'll go to those details in some minutes from now. After the aggregation stage, there is, of course, this market part. So this is where our aggregators, our FESPs, will actually push the bids to the market through the GDBN, through this coordination of this platform, and where the market operator that will be there depending on the operating regions will actually perform the bid selection according to those market rules, okay? And will also claim what are the bids that for those periods will end up becoming the winners for those flexibility needs. And ultimately, in the end, there's this last part on the activation stage, where those bids that were deemed to be activated through the GDBN are pushed to the specific aggregators or flexibility service providers automatically and through the digital APIs, not using emails, okay, to actually command what is the activation directly through the operational platforms, and then directly to the assets that are ultimately being controlled and activated in the end of the value chain. So the cycle here is that a system operator would push flexibility needs. Those needs are pushed to the aggregators that operate in a region for which the flexibility need is being requested. Bids are collected, taken to market. bids are decided, they are communicated back to those flexibility service providers or aggregators for those bids to happen. And then ultimately, in the end, after the process and the period for flexibility bidding closes, settlement is done. It's important to say at this point in time that a lot of different services could appear associated with each one of these different dimensions. So for the case of the enablement, as I was saying in the beginning, as an example, installing or retrofitting of assets or other energy services, but also services to perform the education and to try to reduce from somehow also the energy poverty of some of these consumers. Maintenance services and provide services could be appearing here in the idea of a marketplace being provided by third parties. Okay. In the integration part, the support services from ICT providers, such as we have on our BeFlexible consortium, okay, in this case shaped as the role of SAP, okay, the service to match consumers with aggregators. This means that if I'm an aggregator and if I'm trying to go for a new region, I could have here the opportunity to already check the portfolio of consumers that are available, of course, if they authorize that information to be made available in the marketplace. And this is an opportunity also for aggregators and FESPs to try to understand what is the viability of launching service in a new region where they previously do not have services being provided. In terms of the aggregation, other more technical and operational services, such as sizing of, for instance, energy communities, optimal aggregation of bids, operation of energy communities there, as we also have in our consortium. And very importantly, in the market part, the ability to link with new partners in new regions. For instance, as we will see in the demonstration, one of our pilots is within the Iberian Peninsula, taking place in Spain and in Portugal. And for this case, we have integrated with the OBA market operator directly through our interoperable interfaces. So this means that if tomorrow we approach a new region, for instance, France or Germany, we could interface with that market operator to have here at the multi-market, multi-region perspective. Okay. We are not going into a lot of detail into what is within this role model diagram. The key part is for us, or the key message is to show that during the design, we consider all of these wide set of roles that take an important step within the flexibility value chain. And most importantly, we also accounted for the different types of flows that you can see here depicted with the different colored arrows, including the flows for energy, the flows for flexibility, the flows for the actual money or currency that account for the payment in all of these different steps, okay? The actual operational data orchestration and flows that you can see in red, and then what is information and links with the assets that you can then see in black. And the important part is that somehow the idea of the flexibility value chain and the GDBN platform is to somehow unite and bring everyone on board that you see here depicted with this yellow area, somehow linking with our technical data interfaces, what are the key operations and coordinating everyone in this realm. So this means that we interface with the consumers, as you saw, with the DER managers for the flexibility resources, with the actual aggregators or energy community aggregators, with the flexibility market operators, with the actual system operators, being the DSOs or the TSOs, okay, and all of the different other parties, being more ICT and providers of digital services. So all in all, the idea is that this becomes a one-stop shop, that we can have different services being deployed or just interfaced, okay, along the value chain. I would like then to spend some minutes in the next slides to somehow show you how the actual platform that you will see in the end is actually integrated in our pilots for the BeFlexible project. And in this case, covering two pilots, the French one and the Spanish one. And the idea here is that is for us to illustrate how each one of these different dimensions within the value chain are covered within the pilot. So for instance, for these first two stages of the flexibility capacitation and this enablement integration stage, we can see here the two regions in France where we had pilots, in this case supported by our partners at ACP quarters, okay, in the north and in the south of France, Mougins and Cayenne, where we had consumers integrated with the GDBN in two different dimensions. A first one where new assets were installed and integrated, and in a second way, or in a second approach, where existing assets such as water heaters, electric water heaters, were retrofitted through a partner of us, in this case, Thermovolt, that allowed us to do this integration. And this means that these consumers then became available in the platform, in the flexibility value chain for those regions, and those assets also, and the capacity that those assets can bring to the flexibility value chain are also onboarded there. Then if we can somehow zoom out a bit and go into the aggregation part, we can include multiple flexibility service providers or aggregators. We can include both multiple them here, providing for a region. There is, of course, a step in when one of these flexibility service providers comes in and wants to onboard onto the Grid and Business Network. There is, of course, a process of pre-qualification that is done together with the market operator entity for that region to accommodate whether or not that flexibility service provider or aggregator unites the conditions to actually operate in a given region. So, of course, that this is not a process that we created. This is something which is already established. But what we've done was to allow all of this to happen through the platform and somehow eliminate a lot of back and forward with all of these documentation and integration steps that would otherwise be the case to be done manually by human operators and most likely using email and other mediums such as this. So we will enable this to happen. And most importantly, we integrate the technical platforms for these aggregators so that they can actually automate the process of collecting flexibility needs, placing bids, informing the system on what are the baseline assumptions towards their operation, receiving bid activation requests, and ultimately commanding also the settlement processes for any monetary exchanges that will need to happen, either because bids were not fulfilled or either because bids were fulfilled and there's a payment also accompanying that, okay? And also we can see here the link with the market operators in the exact same way. For instance, we can see that this link here is done through interoperable interfaces. So if we, for instance, are interfacing with a TSO service, for or a TSO operator for a long-term flexibility provisioning services, this arrow here means an interface being done using the IEC 62325-2 market interface system. So this is a SIM derivative, okay? If it's done for short-term flexibility for DSO services, then it's a more flexible USEF-based interface that has been accommodated here and integrated with the DSO, with the DSO exactly. There's also the possibility that this is done directly through the SIM market. And in our consortium, this has also been supported with the assistance of a Schneider Electric partner that has integrated also this in their EcoStruxure platform provider that I guess that many of you should be aware of. And, and then in the end, this interface with the system operators, okay, right in the end, that allows all of these fulfillment of the value chain, because in our model, it's the system operator, regardless of being the D or the TSO, is the one that is commanding what are the flexibility needs for the upcoming periods. So all in all, this means that we can support long-term flexibility services, but also short-term flexibility services within our model. And this is important for the periods. If we are considering short-term flexibility services, we are currently operating in a day-ahead scenario. So this means that this cycle for the flexibility value chain happens daily with clear gate closure times for each one of the processes and who should do what directly be mediated through the digital interfaces. So there's very little human intervention across all of the process. Or if we are pertaining to a more long-term flexibility, it then really depends on which, just whether it is just for reserve market or a different emulation type of service, for instance, to simulate grid conditions. Okay. And the idea here is that since we have a standard interface and process, we can replicate it elsewhere. So that's why in our project and pilot, we have the Grid Data and Business Network being operated in BeFlexible with the DSO in France and in Spanish regions using the exact same platform, and of course having the division on whether the stakeholders and the aggregators operate one in another. There's a high advantage in using such type of a platform because if an aggregator wants to expand its operation elsewhere to a different region, of course that the qualification needs to occur, but ideally under this model, the pre-qualification and the technical integration of the services is already done. So there's an interoperability layer that the GDBN and the grid data and the value chain, the flexibility value chain offers that will immediately lower the costs for that aggregator that so wishes to go to operation in a new region. Okay, so that's one of the key advantages, both economically in the business model, but also technically in the lower burden that partners need to occur. Now we would like maybe to just provide you of a better highlight in what is currently the operational deployment in which the GDBN operates. So it's important to say that this is a TRL 7 operation at this point in time. Okay, but it's still an operation within the realm of an European project. So while the platform is operational in a daily basis, and while daily requests for flexibility and the fulfillment of all of this value chain occurs, and even in the case for the Iberian pilots, we are actually using the real market operator. This is a simulation. Okay, so we would go to a next level TRL increase going to 8 if the platform becomes live. Okay, so in our pilots here, this represents both the French and the Spanish pilot. We see somehow the span. So we can see from the top the DSO that we are using. In this case, this is our partners e-distribution from Spain, and the market operator OMIE that is being integrated to fulfill the market settlement on the bids that are actually being launched to market. You can see here in the center the GDBN as the platform, which is enabled by us, by ISGTech, providing B2C and B2B services, flexibility enablement services, the qualification of assets, and the actual control of the bidding process. Okay. And then on the south part, okay, we can see our aggregators. So we can see that from the Spanish pilot, we have Thermovolt, which is also this is also on the French one, for the retrofit of assets and a thermal flexibility dimension, okay, of thermal loads. In ISGTech 2, because we also have an energy community management platform, the recreation platform, that within our pilot acts as an aggregator of those consumers that exist within the platform, within the community, and Iberdrola 2 also as an aggregator. And you can see that not all of them provide for the same types of services. So this is also to showcase the capabilities and the dynamism that we can create here within this ecosystem. Then for the French pilot, as I said, we also have these thermal load capabilities with Thermovolt 2, with the retrofit of assets, but also our SAP colleagues that included here in these two regions that you saw in the beginning, in Mougins and Cayenne in the north and south parts of France, the corporate flexibility capacity that they have through their EV fleet management services for the for all of the different partners and employees that they have on their each one of these two campuses that they support. Okay, and here they also have an interface with their building energy management system, with the best system, and also storage capacity that they have. Okay, so I would like to show you very briefly a promotional video that we have created for the BeFlexible project. Okay, that somehow what it does is that it includes all of these different dimensions, and afterwards we would like to go to a live demonstration to somehow show you what we can do with the
There are two
GDBN.
pilots being used to demonstrate the GDBN, the Spanish and French pilots. The Spanish pilot includes energy services that have been integrated with GDBN, such as aggregated flexibility from retrofitted and new electric water heaters. French pilot includes flexibility from the corporate EV fleet management at SAP. The flexibility value chain includes 5 stages. The enable stage, where clients and aggregators discover services and are matched together. The integrate stage, where clients and aggregators operation platforms are integrated and assets qualified. The aggregate stage, where aggregator bids are collected and reply to flexibility needs. Market stage, where aggregated bids are submitted to the flexibility market. Finally, the activate stage, where winning bids are dispatched for activation of the assets. In each stage, several services can be included and extend value chain capabilities. The Spanish and French pilots deploy a flexibility value chain, including residential energy community management as aggregators, together with aggregated flexibility from electric water heaters. Tertiary buildings and EV charging complement the array of available flexible assets. In this configuration, INESC Tech's recreation platform, Thermavol and Iberdrola Clientes act as aggregators. IDE and eDistribución acts as DSO in the pilot, and only short-term flexibility market is integrated for real end-to-end demonstration. At the core is the value chain enabler, the grid data and business network, GDBN for short. It links consumers, aggregators, system operators as DSOs or TSOs and flexibility markets. Periodically, the system operator responsible for the area publishes flexibility needs, which are forwarded to aggregators in the area. After an operational assessment on the side of aggregators, they decide if they so wish to place a bid. The bid is handled by GDBN, which forwards it to the flexibility market. After the market clearing process, the system operator decides which bids to activate, while GDBN pushes those requests for aggregator to activate the flexible assets. Finally, through the GDBN, stakeholders can check all past actions, market results, and activation actions for an overview of their activity.
So, of course, we have a publication on the work that you can cover and provide the links afterwards. And at this point in time, we would like maybe to pass directly to just a very short presentation on the platform itself, so that we could see it. And the platform being multi-stakeholder, it allows us to actually do a lot of different things. So I would like maybe to start here to use a login from the perspective of a consumer, that when it links, we'll have available a lot of different information containing its own profile. Okay, in this dashboard on the GDBN allows us to already see across all of the different profiles key information, such as what are the total number of services that are available on the platform, the total number of engaged consumers, the total number of the issue bids that have been issued or created, and the ones that have actually became active. It's important to note that, of course, the information that you are seeing here pertains to the pilot configurations and to the timing of the deployment itself, but it's not simulated data. It's actually data which is real under the pilot activities. You can, of course, see the volumes in terms of flexibility that have been issued, the information on the prices. And of course, this is related in this case to what is the operation where this consumer has been included. This is of course not just on this consumer, but on the results where this consumer has been included. You can consult other consumers. You can see actually where they are geographically placed. Of course, the names of the people are anonymized here. We can see what are the assets that each one of these different, that in this case, this consumer has, and then information about it, where it's located, whether it's connected or not. And for the case of the consumers, whether they authorized to include or not that information. If they want to include new assets, they can do it directly, whether they are connected interoperably, the type of asset, or what are the informations that includes. Afterwards, I would like to show you a bit what is the case, for instance, for the DSO, in this case for our DSO in operation, okay, for instance, which is with a colleague from a distribution here, where we can see the flexibility zones in which they are currently operating. For in this case, they are operating the region, the wider region of Madrid. What are the flexibility bids that they have entered, the current prices, and here we are not currently seeing information because this part kind of halted in the beginning of the year. But I will be able to show you some other details. We can see the metrics directly in terms of the regions and the prices, the distribution on the bids that have been or not done, and most importantly, since in the case of the DSO, we can actually see the flexibility needs, because if you remember from the design, it's the DSO, the actual, or the system operator, that commands the needs. So we can see that currently we have here a flexibility need for the current day, the day of today, which is actually being requested. We have been requesting in this case 0.1 megawatts in terms of flexibility for that region. And if you see here in the right hand side of the screen, you can see where do we stand in terms of these steps into the flexibility value chain. So we have launched the need, and we are currently in the aggregation phase. This means that at this point in time, until the gate closure time, the aggregators will be able to actually push new bids in terms of them then being sent to the market. When time comes, this will move to the market clearing stage, in which the bids are collected, aggregated, pushed to our market operator, and ultimately they will be agreed and activated in case they go through the process. We, of course, can also see the history of what has happened in the past. And for instance, we can see here a detail where a bid has been placed but has not been activated, for instance, okay? Or we can see also the services available, and this is important because each one of the players could have different services. So we could have services for long term, for short term, to enable, to integrate. In this case, we can see here the service for Iberdrola, which is a short-term flexibility, and very important, in case we can accommodate the integration with a technical platform, we can just come here, edit the service, and create new different descriptions and create interfaces with the APIs, which for this case they are not configured. But I guess that the most important case and the most interesting scenario is actually the case for an aggregator, because somehow this is in the middle of the presentation. I will use here the login for my colleague Luis, which is also on the call, to kind of show you what is this perspective. So we can, from the perspective of the aggregator, see what are all of our bids that are currently that have currently been launched or not. Okay, so we see that, for instance, all of these ones have been placed. There are ones that are pertaining here the future. Maybe if we can go a little bit towards today, we can see that, for instance, for that need of the day today, there is already a bid that has been placed. We can see what is the control of the different assets that are currently being included and whether they are accepted or not to participate. Okay, we can then directly go to the specific flexibility needs, the ones that we saw, for instance, for today that are currently live. And then what we can see is that, for instance, for this short-term flexibility, we can see whether or not there are bids for a given period of the time. In this case, for instance, there are not yet any bids for this block, but for instance, for the previous block, there are, okay? And we can see what were the price conditions, the volume conditions, and what were the baseline that were considered in order for this bid to be placed. A lot of this information is somehow mock data, so of course there's a lot of volume there that you see in the megawatts, but this is to say that we have a lot of control in terms of the bidding intervals, and we can go to the lowest granularity in this case of the 15-minute period. Okay. We can, of course, see all of the history that we have done in the past. So, for instance, if we go to a period in the end of the last year, we can see, for instance, that this specific bid passed along all of the process, and the bid itself was rejected by market, as of course would be activated. And we can see what are also the asset catalog, in this case from all of the different consumers that are included in the portfolio of this given aggregator. In this case, we have, for instance, here a series of battery services and an electric vehicle service. Okay. I would also finally would like to close and show you also what is the perspective of a newcomer. So, for instance, if there is a new aggregator that wishes to be enrolled in the Grid Data Business Network, we have a registration that has already been done, but that integration step that I told you in the beginning is a step that is entirely done here through a wizard. So, for instance, we need to understand whether this operator or this aggregator operates in a given region. So, for instance, we are telling that it will operate under the Madrid area. You need to create names for your service. So ultimately the service that will be provided that will be available for others. So we can just come here short term, for instance, and include a service for battery that operates in the Madrid. This is, for instance, in Tech being provided. We need to select here ourselves as a partner, and then we can come up to understand how we integrate this technically. So this is a little bit more of a technical integration process, but for instance, we are authenticating in an OAuth. We need to provide all of the different steps, and this would allow us to actually perform immediately tests and integration procedures with the technical operational platform, so that we ideally immediately start to do tests on the system, and then the platform provides for this integration. There's plenty more to see on the GDBN, okay? There's not a lot of time to show you this. We have all of the different steps included into the documentation, how you should do each one of the different parts, okay? How you should account to the service creation, and how you should govern the day-to-day operation of the GDBN. I hope that in some time we could do a wider and more in-depth workshop showcasing all of the different informations for the platform. I hope that you enjoyed this webinar. We are of course open for any questions during the workshop, and afterwards, if you want, you can just reach us. There's my email on the screen, and we will be glad to talk to you and to somehow showcase in more detail what we can also provide. Okay, thanks for your time. Of course, we are open for some questions.
Thank you very much, Fabio. It was a very comprehensive webinar, and for this outcome of the Horizon Europe BeFlexible project. So I encourage the audience, we have some minutes more, so to put the questions, to ask your curiosities to Fabio. I have a couple of them. So I see that in this platform is the way to put in common different stakeholders. So could you please clarify how the platform could be governed?
Okay, yeah, for sure. So there are several ideas and several directions in terms of the governance itself. So of course depends a little bit from the region, but maybe the first option would be to go with an entity, for instance, such as EDSO, that somehow collects and includes all of the different DSOs in this case, within the European context, okay? They usually do not have this role, but this is something that we have also approached them to try to include a more operational role, just rather than just on the standardization and the procedure. So an entity such as those could be the case. A second option is to go through an ICT provider, such as in our case, we have SAP in our consortium. So a provider of digital services that already have a link with utilities and the energy sector could provide this as a service in the idea too of a business network on their end. And ultimately, somehow this is also catering the needs of the system operator. For instance, a country such as Germany that has a lot of smaller and medium and larger size DSOs could include here the idea of a consortium to manage them all, and through that consortium to include the governance of such type of a platform. So these are ideas. This is a research project. So this is what we have also promoted in terms of conclusions to how the governance of such type of ecosystem should evolve.
Thank you. It's clear. Thank you very much, Fabio. And well, there is a question from the audience that is about the link to documents about the project. I think we can provide the link to the BeFlexible deliverables.
For sure. Indeed, many of them are already public. Okay, some of them are not, because, for instance, they are still going on the final review of the project. Some of the technicalities and pilot details are not yet available as we speak. They will be naturally in some point in time when the review process comes. But architectural decisions, concept decisions, particularly the one in the value chain, are available. Our publications are also public and available. The papers have been submitted to the EEM 24, if I'm not mistaken, on the year, to the electricity energy markets. We are glad to provide the direct links where you can see the details for sure.
Okay, thank you. And also, they can contact you for any information, any collaboration.
For sure.
Okay, thank you. Well, another question from the audience is the BeFlexible data model compatible with the messages defined in the IEC 62747-4/2024?
Indeed, they are not 100% compatible, to be honest, okay? They are aligned with that. There's a part on the standard that has been included, but it's important also to say that although the BeFlexible project is coming to an end, this result is already also being continued in a second European project, which is also Horizon Europe Edge IoT, where, for instance, in BeFlexible, we focused a lot on the DSO needs, and while on Edge IoT, we focused more on the TSO needs, okay? So MFRR services and AFRR services are already being included there. So this is to say that this is a moving target, and the platform and the concept is being continued to evolve. So even if not full implementation and compliance to that and other standards was done currently, the idea is that it will continue to evolve precisely to accommodate those needs.
Okay, thank you very much, Fabio. And I think that this answer triggers the second question that I have noted is about the TRL of the platform is already high, and there are a lot of stakeholders that can be connected and use the platform. But who are the main beneficiaries of the use of the GDBN?
Indeed. So that's a good question, Matteo, and the audience. So I would say maybe we can split it. That I was saying that indeed the platform is currently TRL 7. That is somehow pertaining to the wider control of the value chain and the dynamics of all of the different stakeholders and how they can onboard or not and how they do participate. Of course, there are parts which are lower TRL at the time, namely, for instance, the integration with the TSO market style, that BSP type of a role that is still ongoing, that is a TRL 4 at the time. We will publish in the next times a dedicated website for these with a roadmap. But going directly to your question, I would say there are three types of key stakeholders that are that benefit out of this. First one is, of course, the aggregators, okay? Because they have here an easier interface towards the market, but also towards their own consumers, and perspectively, and most importantly, to new consumers. Okay. There's also, of course, the system operators, being the DSOs or the TSOs that somehow have here a leverage partner and a link with the specific markets. Okay. And I would say that there's a third class of stakeholders, which are the service providers, okay, that do not have not a complete interest in all of the dimensions of the value chain, but they are more niche focused, okay? So they could use this in integrate as a marketplace, also as a data hub of public data and aggregated data, also to understand whether they can evolve the services and could come to a new region to operate. Of course, that we provide these capabilities, but we are now trying to move this into a real operational setting outside the scope of the demonstration of the European projects, which allows us to demonstrate, but all in all, there are not full real operational conditions. Okay, so this is what's being done. Okay, and that is what will allow us to move from a TRL 7 representative and real demonstration in some terms, but for a TRL 8 operational conditions. Okay.
Okay, that's clear. Thank you very much, Fabio. So it seems we reached 1 hour. I see that there are no other questions from the audience. But Fabio, there are some messages in the chat of people willing to connect with you regarding the GDBN. So
indeed, I would ping you to send me an email. Okay, so you have the email on the screen. Of course, that the presentation will in the video recording will be made available afterwards. We are more than willing to continue and to pursue this integration and the inclusion of this in new projects, trying to look for different integrations, of course, fulfilling the value chain that have not yet been able to be demonstrated and pursued. So we are more than willing to reach and to connect. Please do it, and we will find time to talk with each and every one of you.
Okay, thank you very much, Fabio, for your availability and also for your availability to present in this webinar. Thank you for thanks to the BeFlexible project for providing this content, and thank you to all the audience to connect today. And as usual, you will have the recordings of the meeting in the ISGAN YouTube channel. So now it's time to close the meeting. Fabio, would you like to make some final remark before closing?
Yeah, just to thank everyone from being here, to keep awareness of our results, and as I said, just right in the end, reach out to us, and a huge thanks also on behalf of the entire BeFlexible consortium. Okay.